Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time. And I mean way back. We are going to ancient Sparta. But forget the heroic, slow motion battle scenes and chiseled day BS you have seen in movies. We are going to dive into the nitty gritty, the smelly, the downright disgusting reality of being a Spartan soldier. This is not a story of glory. It is a story of grit, grime, and questionable life choices. And fair warning, if you were actually dropped into this timeline, you probably would not survive the first day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It truly helps the channel. Also, I love knowing where you all are tuning in from. So let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let us ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you experience is not a warm blanket or a loving coo. It is the sharp, unforgiving air of the Laconian plain. You have just been born, but there is no celebration. There are no joyful tears, no gentle whispers. Instead, there is a quiet, almost clinical, assessment happening. Your mother holds you for only a moment, a fleeting touch of warmth against the cold, before you are handed over. The hands that take you are not of a midwife. They are rough, careless, and purposeful. You are swaddled not in soft linen, but in a simple, coarse cloth, and carried out of the small, stone house. You are now the property of the state. Your very existence is subject to approval. You are carried through the austere streets of Sparta. There are no grand marble temples in your immediate sight, just functional, unadorned buildings. The destination is a place called the Lesche, a sort of public meeting hall where the elders of your tribe gather. You are just a few hours old, a tiny, wrinkled thing, and yet you are about to face your first, and most important, inspection. The men who await you are members of the Geographic, the Council of Elders. They are grizzled veterans, their faces like maps of old battles, their eyes missing the softness of a doting grandparent. They see you not as a child, but as a future brick in the wall of Spartan defense. You are unwrapped and laid bare on a cold stone surface. The elders peer down at you. They are not looking for a family resemblance or counting your toes out of affection. They are looking for defects. They turn you over, extending your tiny arms and legs, checking the straightness of your spine, the shape of your head. They are searching for any sign of weakness, any physical imperfection that might render you unfit for the life of a warrior. Your cry, when it comes, is not met with comfort, but is judged for its strength. A weak, mewling cry is a bad sign. A robust, angry wail, that is more like it. Then comes a particularly stringent, frankly, unnerving test that some ancient writers, like Plutarch, swore by. A shallow basin is brought forward, filled not with warm water, but with unmixed wine. You are plunged into it. The theory, as bizarre as it sounds, was that the strong wine would cause weak or epileptic infants to have convulsions and perish, while a healthy baby would temper in the liquid, emerging stronger. It is your first bath, and it is a test of survival. The pungent liquid stings your fresh skin, and your cries echo in the stoic silence of the hall. This is the moment that has been immortalized in legend, the point of no return. If you fail this inspection, if your limbs are crooked, if you seem frail, or if you react poorly to the wine bath, your fate is sealed. The stories say you would be taken to a nearby Casamon Mount Tegetus, a place called the Apio the Te, which translates to the deposits. There, you would be left to the elements. A harsh, brutal form of quality control. However, it is right here that we have to press pause on the dramatic legend. Historians are still fiercely debating whether this practice was as common as the old tales suggest. Archaeologists have excavated around Mount Taygetus and have found remains of adult men, not the heaps of infant bones you would expect if this were a routine procedure. Some scholars now argue that the story of the cliff was more of a terrifying piece of state propaganda. A myth Sparta told about itself to project an image of ultimate toughness. Perhaps it was a symbolic threat, or a fate reserved for only the most severely deformed infants, not just the slightly smaller or i.e. ones. The truth is, we do not know for sure. It remains one of those chilling what-ifs of the ancient world. But for you, in this moment, the legend feels terrifyingly real. The elders murmur amongst themselves, their voices low and gravelly. They poke and prod you one last time. And then, a verdict is reached. You are deemed well-formed and sturdy. You have passed. You are wrapped up again and handed back to your father, who takes you home. You are returned to the arms of your mother. But something has fundamentally changed in your first few hours of life. You have been weighed, measured, and approved. Your life is not a gift from your parents. It is a loan from Sparta. And for the next 7 years, you will live in the warmth of your family. A temporary comfort before the state comes to claim its investment. The coldness of that first inspection will linger, a silent promise of the life to come. Those 7 years pass in a blur of simple, domestic life. It is a stark contrast to the cold appraisal of your birth. You feel the warmth of a hearth fire, the taste of bread baked by your mother, the rare but comforting weight of the hand of your father on your shoulder. You play simple games with knucklebones. You listen to stories, not fairy tales, but epic poems of heroes and gods, of Achilles and Heracles. It is a life that is still austere by any other Greek standard. But it is your life. It has a rhythm, a sense of belonging. But you are always aware, in the back of your mind, that this is temporary. You are a state asset on loan. And then, the day comes. It is your 7th birthday. But there is no celebration. The morning air feels heavier. Your mother does not sing. She moves with a quiet, deliberate purpose. Her face a mask of stoic resolve that you will come to understand is the highest form of Spartan love. She hands you a piece of hard barley bread, and her hand lingers on yours for just a second too long. That is it. That is the goodbye. Your father leads you out of the house. You do not look back. You are not supposed to. You walk through the familiar dirt roads. But today they feel different, leading you away from everything you know. You arrive at a long, low, functional building made of stone and timber. It looks more like a stable than a school. This is the Agoge, the infamous Spartan training system. And for the next 13 years, this will be your home, your school, and your crucible. Your father says nothing. He simply releases your hand and points you toward the open doorway. You step inside, and the change is immediate and overwhelming. The air inside is thick with the smell of sweat, damp earth, and unwashed boys. It is a feral, animal smell that clings to the back of your throat. Dozens of other boys, some your age, some older, are roughhousing, shouting, or sitting in sullen groups. There is a chaotic energy here, a stark departure from the ordered silence of your home. You are no longer an individual. You are now part of an agela, a herder pack. It is less of a class and more of a wolf pack in training. An older boy, maybe 15 or 16, strides over to you. He is the leader of your pack. His face is already hard, his eyes assessing. He shoves you, not out of malice, but simply to test your balance, to see if you will cry. This is your new family. Your loyalty is no longer to your parents, but to these boys and to the man who oversees all of you. That man is the paid or nomos, the boy hunter. He is an elite citizen chosen for the job, and he carries a whip, which he is not afraid to use. His job is not to teach you geometry or philosophy. His job is to forge you, to break down your individuality and rebuild you as a cog in the Spartan war machine. He is your warden, your drill sergeant, and your absolute authority. His presence is a constant, intimidating force in the background. The mainstream historical fact here is the Agoge itself. This brutal, state-enforced education system was the bedrock of Spartan society. It was designed to instill discipline, obedience, and physical endurance above all else. Every Spartan male citizen, except the heirs to the two royal thrones, was required to go through it. It was the great equalizer in the furnace that created the Spartan hoplite. Now for the weird little detail. The boys within the Agoge had their own slang and internal culture. For instance, the older pack leaders were called bro tires, and they often instigated fights between the younger boys to toughen them up and observe their fighting spirit. It was an organized system of bullying, sanctioned by the state as a form of character assessment. You quickly learn that showing weakness or pain is the fastest way to invite more of it, both from the older boys and the paid own homos. But here is where historians start to argue a bit. While writers like Plutarch and Xenophon give us these vivid, detailed accounts of the Agoge, they were not Spartans themselves, and were often writing with a specific agenda, sometimes idealizing Spartan society. The actual, day-to-day curriculum is a subject of debate. How much time was spent on reading and writing versus physical training? We know they were taught to be laconic, to speak concisely. But what did those lessons actually look like? Were they sitting in circles practicing witty comebacks? Or was it just beaten into them? The exact balance between the brutal physical hardening and the minimal intellectual education is something scholars are still trying to reconstruct from fragmented sources. They are piecing together a puzzle with most of the pieces missing. Your first day ends as the sun sets. There are no beds, no mattresses, no pillows. You are pointed to a corner of the packed earth floor. You are expected to sleep there, huddled for warmth with the other new arrivals. The ground is cold and hard. The room is filled with the sounds of shuffling, coughing, and the quiet sobbing of a few boys who have not yet learned to hide their fear. You lie there, every muscle tense, the smell of the barracks filling your lungs. The comforting warmth of home is now just a faint memory. This is your new reality. The state has collected its investment, and the process of stripping you down to your bare essence has begun. The next morning, you are woken before dawn by a sharp kick from one of the older boys. There is no gentle rousing here. Sleep is a state you are torn from, not one you drift out of. The air is cold enough to see your breath. A smooth, white cloud in the gloom of the barracks. Your first official act as a member of the Agoge is to receive your uniform. But do not imagine a neat pile of folded clothes. What you get is one item, a single piece of cloth. This is the foe in Icaeus, the famous Spartan red cloak. It is made of a heavy, coarse wool, dyed a deep crimson. You are handed this single garment. And this is not just a quote. It is your shirt, your coat, your blanket, and, for all intents and purposes, your entire wardrobe for the year. You get one, not one for summer and one for winter, not one for training and one for sleeping. Just one. You wrap the rough fabric around your small frame. It is itchy. It smells vaguely of lanolin from the sheep and whatever cheap, earthy dye was used to get that iconic red color. The crimson dye, by the way, was a practical choice. It was supposedly chosen because it did a good job of hiding the sight of blood, both yours and the enemy's, which was thought to be less demoralizing for the troops in the heat of battle. That is the classic historical explanation you will find in most textbooks. It is all about battlefield psychology. But as you stand there, shivering, you realize the more immediate, less glorious reason for the existence of the cloak. It is incredibly versatile. During the day, you wear it draped over one shoulder and pinned, leaving your arms free for training. At night, you wrap yourself in it completely, pulling it over your head to trap every last bit of body heat as you lie on the hard floor. When it rains, it is your only protection. The thick wool becoming heavy and damp, but still providing a meager barrier against the cold. Now for a slightly more disgusting, less talked about detail. How often do you think this cloak gets washed? The answer is almost never. Cleanliness is seen as a sign of softness, of effeminacy. A true Spartan is supposed to be hardened, inured to discomfort, so your cloak quickly accumulates the grime of your life. It gets caked with mud from training drills, stained with berry juice from foraging, stiff with your own sweat, and probably infested with fleas and lice from sleeping in a crowded barracks. It becomes a walking testament to your hardship. The smell alone would be enough to knock over a lesser man. In a strange way, the filthier your cloak, the more you are proving your Spartan credentials. It is a badge of honor. In the most literal and gift in its sense, you will wear this same cloak through the scorching heat of a Laconian summer and the biting winds of winter. There is no concept of seasonal clothing. The idea is to force your body to adapt, to become so tough that heat and cold are minor inconveniences, not things you need special clothing for. You learn to sweat through it in the summer and shiver under it in the winter, and you are punished if you complain about either. This brings us to a point of academic discussion. Just how extreme was this? Plutarch, our primary source for much of this, paints a picture of absolute, unyielding austerity. He claims the boys were given only the one cloak from the age of 12 onwards. But some historians wonder if this is an exaggeration. Was there truly no other form of tunic or undergarment provided, especially for the younger boys? It seems almost impossibly harsh. Perhaps the one cloak rule applied only to a specific, final stage of the training. Or maybe it was another part of the Spartan myth-making machine, an ideal of toughness that was not always practiced to the absolute letter. Could there have been a simple, rough spun to Nicoran underneath that later? More romantic sources simply failed to mention because it did not fit the hardcore narrative. We do not have Spartan fashion magazines from the 5th century BC, so we cannot be certain. The archaeological record is sparse on textiles. As they decompose, we are left, once again, with the dramatic stories and the nagging feeling that the reality might have been slightly, just slightly, less miserable. But for you, right now, the misery is very real. You look around at the other boys. Everyone is a sea of crimson. The cloaks of the older boys are faded, frayed, and stained with the history of their training. Yours is still relatively new. Its color bright, its texture stiff. It marks you as a novice. Over the coming months and years, this single piece of fabric will become your second skin. It will absorb your sweat, your tears, and maybe even your blood. It will carry the stench of your struggle. You will learn to find a strange sort of comfort in its familiar weight and scratchiness. It is a symbol of everything you are becoming. Hard, resilient, and utterly indifferent to the kind of comfort other Greeks take for granted. You are no longer just a boy. You are a boy in a red cloak, and that makes all the difference. Your new life in the Agoge is a relentless cycle of physical exertion, from dawn until dusk. You are pushed to your limits, running, wrestling, throwing the javelin and discus. Every activity is a competition. Every competition a chance to prove your worth or suffer the consequences of failure. Your body, once soft and accustomed to the gentle pace of home, is now constantly aching. Your muscles burn, your lungs heave, and your stomach growls with a hunger that is never fully satisfied. The rations are intentionally meager, a thin barley gruel that provides just enough energy to keep you going, but never enough to make you feel full. After a long day of being caked in dust, sweat, and the occasional smear of blood from a wrestling match gone too far, you might think a nice, warm bath is in order. You would be profoundly mistaken. The very idea of a hot bath is considered the height of decadence and weakness, a corrupting influence from other, softer Greek city-states like Athens. For a Spartan, such comfort is poison. So, what do? You get a bath. But it is a Spartan bath, once a day, or perhaps even less frequently. You and your pack are marched down to the banks of the Eurotas River. This is the river that flows through the heart of Laconia. Its waters fed by the snowmelt from the Taygetus Mountains. Even in the height of summer, the water is shockingly cold. In the winter, it is breathtakingly icy, with frost sometimes clinging to the reeds along the bank. There is no soap. There are no towels. You strip off your single red cloak, the one you also sleep in, and you plunge into the frigid water. The shock of the cold is a physical blow. It drives the air from your lungs and makes your skin prickle and burn. The goal here is not to get clean in the modern sense. You do not lather up. You do not scrub. You splash around for a few moments, the icy water rinsing off the most superficial layer of dirt and sweat. It is more of a shock treatment than a cleansing ritual. The mainstream history lesson here is that this practice was central to the Spartan philosophy of katarrhea, or endurance, by forcing themselves to endure extreme cold on a regular basis. They believed they were hardening their bodies and minds, making them impervious to the physical hardships of a military campaign. A soldier who does not flinch at an ice bath is less likely to flinch from the cold fear of battle. It was a calculated, deliberate part of your conditioning. Now for the gross and slightly counterintuitive. Fun fact: while you are in the water, you might use a strigil. This is a curved metal tool, common throughout the ancient Greek world, used for scraping oil, sweat, and dirt off the skin. But here is a Spartan twist. You do not get the luxury of applying a nice layer of olive oil first, as an Athenian athlete would. You just scrape your dry, dirty skin. It is an abrasive, painful process, and after you have scraped yourself raw, you might take a handful of sand from the riverbank and use that to scrub your body. So, you are essentially exfoliating with sandpaper. It might remove some grime, but it also probably leaves you covered in tiny scratches and abrasions, opening up your skin to all sorts of potential infections, especially in the less than sanitary conditions of the barracks. Hygiene, it seems, was a process of controlled self-abuse. This brings us to another area of scholarly debate. How often did these river baths actually happen? Was it a daily ritual, as the more dramatic accounts imply, or was it less frequent? Some historians argue that bathing, even in this brutal form, might have been a seasonal affair, perhaps abandoned altogether during the harshest months of winter. The logistics of marching dozens of shivering boys to an icy river in the dead of winter seem punishing even by Spartan standards. Furthermore, There is the question of its actual effect. While it certainly built mental toughness, constant exposure to extreme cold and dampness with inadequate clothing or shelter is a recipe for hypothermia, pneumonia, and other illnesses. Did the Spartans have some sort of immunity? Or was the death rate from sickness in the Agoge simply an accepted part of the culling process? The ancient sources, focused on heroism and toughness, are silent on the number of boys who might have succumbed to a common cold that turned into something worse. They do not write about the unglamorous, wheezing deaths, only the glorious ones in battle. After your bath, you scramble out of the river, your skin blue and numb. You do not get to dry off with a soft towel. You are expected to simply stand in the cold air and let it evaporate, a process known as air drying. Or, more likely, you just pull your still damp cloak back onto your still damp body, trapping a layer of cold moisture against your skin. The shivering does not stop for a long time. You then march back to the barracks, your teeth chattering, to face a meager meal and a cold night's sleep on the floor. You have not really gotten clean. You have just traded a layer of dried earth for a layer of damp chill. You have survived another test, proven your endurance, and prepared your body for a night of shivering under your one all-purpose garment. This is not about hygiene. It is about becoming a weapon. And weapons do not need to be clean. They just need to be hard. The hardening process does not stop with your skin. It goes all the way down to the soles of your feet. As you shiver your way back from the Eurotis River, you are not walking in comfortable sandals or sturdy boots. You are barefoot, and you will remain barefoot for the entirety of your time in the Agoge, not just during specific training exercises, not just in the summer, all year round. The ground beneath you is not a manicured lawn. The paths of Sparta and the surrounding countryside are a mixture of hard-packed earth, sharp stones, thorny weeds, and, in the summer, scorching hot dust that feels like walking on coals. In the winter, the ground can be frozen, slick with mud, or covered in a thin, sharp layer of frost. It does not matter. You walk, run, and train on it without any protection. During your first few weeks, your feet are a mess. They are soft, tender, and completely unaccustomed to this level of abuse. Every step is a small agony. You get blisters, which pop and become open sores. You get cuts from sharp rocks and splitters from fallen branches. The thorns of thistle plants seem to magnetically attract your heels. You learn to walk with a careful, deliberate gait, trying to avoid the worst of the terrain. But there is no escaping the constant punishment. Crying or complaining about your sore feet is, of course, out of the question. It would earn you a sneer from your peers and a sharp blow from the paid onomos. Pain is a lesson, not a problem. This is a well-documented aspect of the Spartan training system. The famous Greek historian and philosopher Xenophon, who was a great admirer of the Spartans, wrote about this specifically. He explained that the purpose of going barefoot was twofold. First, it was believed to make the boys faster and more agile. The logic was that feet unburdened by sandals could grip the earth better, allowing them to leap and climb more effectively than their sandal-wearing opponents. It was about creating a more nimble, versatile soldier. The second, and more important, purpose was to toughen the soles of the feet until they were as hard as leather. Over time, your perpetually abused feet respond. The skin on the bottom becomes thick, calloused, and almost numb. You develop a natural shoe made of hardened flesh. This was a huge tactical advantage. A Spartan soldier could run across terrain that would shred the feet of another man, or at least slow him down considerably as he picked his way carefully. You could charge over rocky ground or through thorny underbrush without a second thought. Your feet become another one of your weapons. Now for the weird, and frankly, quite disgusting, side effect of this practice. What happens when you get a cut on your foot? In an environment as filthy as the Agoge barracks and training grounds, filled with animal waste, human waste, and general grime, an open wound on your foot is an open invitation for infection, tetanus, or lactohood, caused by the Clostridium tetani bacteria found in soil and manure, would have been a constant and deadly threat. A simple cut from a sharp stone could easily become a fatal infection. Without antibiotics, a deep puncture wound that became infected would lead to a slow, agonizing death. It is a miracle that any of you survive. You learn to become incredibly adept at ignoring minor injuries, but you also live with the constant, low-level risk that a small misstep could kill you in a way that is far less glorious than dying in the phalanx. This leads us to a fascinating point of historical contention. Just how effective was this training? Really? Whilst anything sings its praises, some modern military historians and ILO-gists raise an eyebrow. Does going barefoot truly make you a faster runner over long distances? While it might improve agility for short bursts, heavy, hobnail-lead military sandals, like the Roman collidae, offered superior protection and support for long marches, reducing foot fatigue and injury. The Spartans might have been able to handle a rocky battlefield better. But how did their feet hold up on a 50-mile march? Did the supposed benefits of agility outweigh the very real risks of injury and infection? Scholars debate whether this was a genuinely brilliant tactical choice, or another example of the Spartans prioritizing ideological toughness over practical, long-term military effectiveness. Was it truly about creating better soldiers? Or was it more about adhering to a romanticized, archaic ideal of the natural warrior? The answer probably lies somewhere in between. As the years go by, you cease to notice the ground. Your feet are like hooves. You can walk on sharp gravel and barely feel it. You can stand on hot earth without flinching. You have successfully turned a part of your body into a piece of equipment. You look down at your own feet. They are wide, scarred, and covered in a thick, yellowish layer of calloused skin. They are ugly. They are utilitarian. They are Spartan. They are a testament to the fact that every part of you, from the top of your head to the soles of your feet, is being systematically reforged. The soft boy who arrived here is being chipped away, one painful step at a time. There is a constant, gnawing emptiness in your stomach. The food you are given in the Agoge is famously scarce. It is a deliberate policy. The meager rations of barley porridge, a bit of cheese, and the occasional fig are just enough to keep you from collapsing. But you are always, perpetually hungry. This is not an oversight. It is a core part of your education. A soldier on campaign cannot count on 3 full meals a day. He needs to be able to function, to fight, while hungry. So, Sparta starves you to prepare you. But there is a second, more subversive lesson being taught here. The elders in the paid nomos make it clear. If you are hungry, you should supplement your diet, but you will not be given more food. You must acquire it yourself. You must steal it. This is your introduction to another essential Spartan skill, larceny. You are actively encouraged to steal food from local farms, from the kitchens of citizens, or from any other source you can find. It is a game, a very serious game. The objective is to get more food to fill your aching belly. But there is a crucial rule. You must not get caught. Getting caught is the only crime. If you successfully steal a loaf of bread, a handful of figs, or even a whole piglet, and you bring it back to share with your pack undetected. You are praised. Your cunning and stealth are celebrated. You have proven yourself resourceful, a valuable trait for a future soldier who might need to live off the land or raid enemy supplies. But if you are caught in the act, if a farmer grabs you by the ear, or a cook spots you sneaking out of the pantry, the punishment is severe. You are not punished for the act of stealing. You are punished for your incompetence, for your clumsiness. The person who caught you will likely give you a good thrashing on the spot. But the real punishment comes when you are dragged back to the Agoge. There, you will be publicly shamed and viciously flogged by the paid onomos. The lesson is burned into you. Be better. Be quieter. Be invisible. This state-sanctioned thievery is a key historical component of the Agoge. Pootersh tells the famous story of a boy who stole a live fox and hid it under his cloak. To avoid being discovered, he allowed the terrified animal to claw and bite at his stomach, disembowelling him, and he stood silent and stone-faced until he dropped dead. The story is almost certainly an exaggeration, a piece of moralizing folklore, but it perfectly illustrates the Spartan ideal. The shame of being caught is worse than death itself. Now, let us consider the ungygific reality of this. You are a hungry, dirty boy, sneaking around in the dead of night. What are you stealing? It is not packaged food from a sterile supermarket. You are grabbing vegetables straight from the dirt, possibly covered in animal manure used as fertilizer. You are snatching a wheel of cheese from a shed where mice and insects might have been crawling all over it. You are eating fruit that has already fallen to the ground and started to rot. There is no washing, no cooking. You are oft unstuffing this stolen food into your mouth as you run, in the dark. Before you can be caught, the risk of ingesting parasites, harmful bacteria like E. coli or salmonella, and all manner of filth is astronomically high. This is a bizarre, and quite disgusting, little detail of Spartan life. Your quest for survival forces you into a direct confrontation with filth. You learn to eat things that would make a modern person violently ill. A little dirt on a stolen turnip. That is just extra seasoning. A bit of mold on a hunk of bread. You just eat around it. Or maybe you do not even bother. Your stomach, like the rest of your body, is expected to harden, to adapt. Food poisoning, dysentery, and other gastrointestinal ailments must have been rampant. But, like a common cold, complaining about a stomachache was not an option. You were expected to suffer in silence. It is likely that many boys were weeded out of the system not by a whip, but by a simple, untreated case of diarrhea leading to fatal dehydration. This brings us to a point of debate among classicists and social historians. What was the true purpose of this tradition? Was it really about training soldiers for foraging and stealth, as the Spartans themselves claim? Or was it a form of social control? Some scholars argue that by forcing the boys to steal from the very citizens they were supposed to protect, the state was breaking down traditional community bonds. It subtly reinforced the idea that your primary loyalty was to your pack and the state, not to the broader community or its rules. It also created a constant state of low-level conflict and vigilance within Spartan society, keeping everyone on their toes. Was it a practical military lesson, or a sophisticated tool for psychological conditioning? The argument continues. As the Spartans left us no manifestos explaining their bizarre educational philosophy. Tonight, you are a shadow. The moon is hidden behind the clouds. Your stomach feels like it is eating itself. You creep along the stone wall of a private home, your calloused feet making no sound on the dusty path. Your target is the fig tree in the courtyard. You can smell its sweet, ripe fruit. Your heart is pounding, not just from hunger, but from the fear of the whip. You move with a predatory stillness that has been beaten into you. You are no longer just a boy. You are a hunter. And the line between right and wrong has been deliberately and permanently blurred. You have survived another day of brutal training on the night of stealthy, stomach-churning theft. Maybe you got lucky and managed to snag a few sour apples or a handful of olives. It is not much, but it is something to quiet the angry animal in your gut. Now, you are back in the communal dining hall of the Agoge, and it is time for your official meal. This is the meal you do not have to steal. This is the meal the state provides. And you are about to wish you were eating that muddy turnip from last night. In front of you is a dark, unappetizing liquid sloshing around in a rough wooden bowl. There are lumps of something solid floating in it. The smell hits you first. It is a coppery, sour, metallic stench, like old blood mixed with vinegar. This is it. This is the legendary, the infamous, the almost mythical Spartan black soup, or melis zeomos. The recipe for this culinary nightmare is one of history's most enduring gastronomic horrors. The core ingredients were pork, salt, vinegar, and blood. That is right, pig's blood. The cook would slaughter a pig, and the blood would be collected and used as a primary component of the broth. The pork was likely boiled for a long time, its meat contributing what little flavor it could, while the vinegar was added to act as an emulsifier, preventing the blood from coagulating as it cooked. The result was a thick, dark, gravy-like soup. This dish is the most famous historical example of Spartan austerity. It was their staple food, eaten by boys in the Agoge and adult warriors in their common messes alike. For the Spartans, it was the ultimate functional food. It was packed with protein and iron from the meat and blood, providing essential nutrients for a warrior class. It was cheap to make, using every part of the pig, and, most importantly, it was deliberately unappetizing. The idea was to train soldiers to eat for fuel, not for pleasure. A man who was not picky about his food, who could stomach this black soup day in and day out, would not complain about battlefield rations. As you take your first reluctant sip, the taste is as bad as the smell. It is salty, sour, and has a strong, irony aftertaste that coats your entire mouth. The texture is gritty. You have to force it down, trying not to gag. The older boys around you slurp it down without a second thought, their palates long dead to any concept of flavor. They watch you, the newcomers, for any sign of disgust. To refuse the soup or to show revulsion is to show weakness. So you swallow. You swallow again. You eat to survive. Now for a truly bizarre little anecdote that illustrates just how disgusting this soup was to outsiders. There is a famous story, likely apocryphal but repeated by ancient authors like Plutarch and Cicero, about a man from Sybaris, a Greek city in Italy famous for its luxury and fine food. This Sybarite managed to get a taste of Spartan black soup. After one mouthful, he reportedly said, "Now I understand why the Spartans do not fear death." The implication was that any life that involved eating this soup regularly was not a life worth clinging to. It became a sort of running joke in the ancient world. The soup was so notoriously awful that even other hardy Greeks, men accustomed to simple fare, found it revolting. But here is where we get to a bit of a historical debate. What did the black soup really taste like? While the core ingredients are known, the exact recipe is lost to time. We do not know what spices, if any, were used. Were there onions, garlic, wild herbs, or was it truly just the four grim ingredients? Food historians and experimental archaeologists have tried to recreate it, with varying and often disgusting results. Some argue that with the right balance of vinegar and seasoning, it might have been more akin to a modern blood sausage or a savory black pudding. Perhaps not delicious, but palatable. Others maintain that, given the Spartan disdain for pleasure, it was likely as foul as the stories suggest. Was it a reasonably nutritious, if bland, stew? Or was it the culinary war crime history has made it out to be? Without a surviving recipe, we can only guess based on the horrified reactions of ancient foodies. You force down the last of the lumpy, metallic broth. It sits in your stomach like a stone, but it is a warm stone. The hunger pangs subside, replaced by a sullen, leaden fullness. You have consumed your daily dose of Spartan identity. This soup is more than food. It is a sacrament. It is a physical manifestation of their entire philosophy. Shun pleasure. Embrace hardship. Be strong. Every bowl you finish is another step away from the person you were, and another step closer to the unfeeling, uncomplaining soldier you are required to become. You learn to associate that coppery taste not with disgust, but with survival, and in the twisted logic of the Agoge. That is a victory. As darkness falls, the day's exhaustion finally settles deep into your bones. The black soups, it's heavy in your stomach, a grim anchor in a sea of fatigue. It is time for sleep. But just as with every other aspect of your life here, comfort is a forbidden luxury. You will not be retiring to a soft bed with a warm blanket. You will be sleeping on a pile of sharp, uncomfortable weeds. Earlier in the day, as part of your duties, you were sent down to the banks of the Eurotas River, not for another icy bath, but for something else. Your task was to gather reeds, not the soft, leafy tops, but the hard, stocky parts, and you were given a specific instruction. You were not allowed to use a knife or any other tool. You had to break them off with your bare hands. You spent an hour or more wading into the marshy riverbank, your bare feet sinking into the cold mud. You gripped the rough stalks of the reeds and pulled, twisted, and snapped them with your hands. The sharp edges of the reeds left tiny, stinging cuts all over your palms and fingers. It was another one of those seemingly pointless exercises in enduring pain and discomfort. By the time you were done, you had a large bundle of sharp, scratchy stalks and your hands were raw. This is what you bring back to the barracks. This is your bed. You find your designated spot on the packed earth floor, a space barely big enough for your own body. You lay out your bundle of reeds. It is not a mattress. It is a lumpy, uneven pile of what feels like tiny wooden spears. As you lie down on it, the broken ends of the reeds poke into your back, your sides, your legs. It is impossible to find a comfortable position. Every shift in weight is met with a new jab from a sharp stalk. This practice is a well-attested part of the Agoge, described by writers like Plutarch. The explicit purpose was, once again, to harden you. A boy who could sleep soundly on a bed of sharp reeds would not be troubled by the hard, uneven ground of a military encampment. He could sleep anywhere, in any conditions, and wake up ready to fight. It was about making you immune to the very concept of physical comfort. Now for the less than obvious, and rather unpleasant, little detail about your sleeping arrangements. Your reed mattress is not a sterile product. You have just pulled it from a swampy riverbank. It is damp. It is probably teeming with insects, spiders, and other small, creepy things that live in the reeds. As you settle down for the night, you might feel the tickle of a spider crawling across your arm, or the sharp pinch of some other nocturnal bug that has made its home in your bedding. The reeds also start to decompose over time, developing a musty, swampy smell that mixes with the general stench of unwashed boys in the barracks. Your sleeping area is a small, personal ecosystem of filth and discomfort. In the winter, you are allowed to add thistledown to your reed pile, which sounds like a small mercy, but it was likely just enough to add a bit of insulation, not actual softness. It was the Spartan equivalent of upgrading from sandpaper to slightly finer grits and paper. This brings us to a debate among social historians about the sleeping arrangement. We know the boys slept in these communal barracks, in their packs. But how was it organized? Was it a chaotic pile of bodies? Or was there a strict hierarchy even in sleep? The sources are vague, but it is likely the older boys, the pack leaders, claimed the better spots, perhaps areas less prone to drafts or with slightly smoother floors. There is also the psychological aspect, forcing you to sleep in such close quarters. Sharing body heat for survival created an intense, almost familial bond within your agela. This bond, this brotherhood forged in shared misery, was essential for the battlefield, where you would stand shoulder to shoulder with these same boys in the phalanx. But scholars debate the nature of these relationships. Were they purely about camaraderie and loyalty, as idealized sources like Xenophon suggest? Or, in an environment with no privacy and no female contact, did these close quarters lead to other forms of bonding and power dynamics that ancient writers, and even some modern ones, are hesitant to discuss openly? The silence of the sources on this topic is profound. You pull your single red cloak over your body, tucking it in as tightly as you can. It is your only shield against the cold night air and the jabbing reeds. You lie there, wretched, trying to ignore the pokes in your back and the suspicious rustling sounds coming from the reeds beneath you. The room is filled with the sound of breathing, the occasional cough, or a whimper from a boy having a nightmare. You are surrounded by bodies, yet you feel completely alone in your discomfort. You are not resting. You are enjoying. You are learning to treat sleep not as a respite, but as just another hardship to be overcome. And as you finally drift off into a shallow, fitful slumber, your dreams are not of soft beds, but as a cold, hard ground of a future battlefield. It is exactly what your trainers intended. The years in the Agoge grind on. You are no longer the small, frightened 7-year-old who first walked through that door. You are a teenager now, hard muscled, laconic, and thoroughly brutalized. The constant hunger, the cold baths, the barefoot running, the bed of reeds, these are no longer punishments. They are simply the texture of your life. You have been forged in a furnace of hardship, and now you are approaching the final, most terrifying test of your youth. It is called the Crypt TIA. Not every boy is chosen for this. It is a secret rite of passage reserved for the most promising, most cunning, and perhaps most ruthless young Spartans. It is a kind of advanced studies program in Terran survival. If you are selected, you are, for a time, removed from your pack. You are now officially a member of the Crypt TIA, the Secret Service. Your final exam in the Agoge is not a wrestling match or a race. You are sent out of the city, alone. You are given nothing but a single knife. No food, no clothes, no shoes. Your mission is to disappear into the countryside and survive. You are to travel only at night, hiding during the day to avoid being seen. You must live off the land, using all the skills of stealth, foraging, and theft that you have been taught. You are a ghost, a whisper in the landscape. This is the mainstream understanding of the Crypt TIA, a shadowy institution described by Plato and Plutarch. It was the ultimate test of a young Spartan's self-reliance and killer instinct. To survive, you had to become a predator. You had to learn the rhythms of the wild, how to track animals, how to find edible plants, and how to move without a sound. But there was a darker, more sinister purpose to the cryptia, and it is one of the most infamous aspects of Spartan society. Your primary targets were not rabbits or wild boar. Your primary targets were the helots. The helots were the state-owned serfs, the original inhabitants of Laconia and Messene, who had been conquered by the Spartans generations ago. They were not chattel slaves to be bought and sold, but a subjugated population tied to the land they worked. They vastly outnumbered the Spartan citizens, and the constant fear of a helot uprising was the central, defining anxiety of the Spartan state. So, your mission as a member of the cryptia was to terrorize the helot population. You were instructed to stalk the roads at night and kill any helot you found. The strongest, most defiant-looking helots were said to be the preferred targets. It was a state's ancient murder spree, a calculated policy of terror designed to keep the helots subjugated, to eliminate potential leaders, and to blood the future elite of the Spartan army. You were learning to kill not in the heat of a pitched battle, but in the cold, silent dark. Let us talk about the hygiene of this experience, which is, to put it mildly, non-existent. You are living like a wild animal. You sleep in ditches, in caves, under bushes. You are covered in a permanent layer of mud and grime for camouflage. Your water source is a stagnant pool or a muddy stream. The food you eat is either raw, a stolen piece of a farmer's crop, a trapped bird, or hastily cooked over a tiny, smokeless fire. You are likely suffering from malnutrition and dehydration. Your body is a breeding ground for parasites, both internal and external. Any cut or scratch from a thorn bush is a potential death sentence from infection. You are pushing your body to the absolute limit of what it can endure. The stench you emit would be overwhelming. You smell sweat, dirt, fear, and blood. This brings us to a major and heated academic controversy. What was the real nature of the cryptia? The sources are hostile or late. Plato describes it as a form of harsh military training. Plutarch, writing centuries later, gives us the grim picture of the state's ancient murder of helots. Some historians take this at face value, seeing it as a brutal but effective tool of social control. A secret police forcing a final exam and ruthlessness rolled into one. However, other scholars are more skeptical. They argue that the stories of helot killing might be an exaggeration, a black legend spread by the enemies of Sparta, particularly the Athenians, to demonize them. They suggest the cryptia might have been more of a wilderness survival and reconnaissance test, with the killing aspect being a later, hostile invention. Could it have been an elite patrol force that monitored the helots, with the authority to execute troublemakers, rather than a random murder squad? The truth is buried. The Spartans, true to form, kept their secrets. We are left with a chilling, unambiguous portrait of what it took to graduate at the top of your class in Sparta. You are huddled in a thicket of thorny bushes as the sun rises. The world is waking up, but you must go to sleep. Your stomach is a hollow ache. Last night, you managed to catch a frog by a stream and ate it raw. The night before, you saw a helot walking home late on a lonely road. He was a big man, strong from a life of labor. You followed him for a mile, your knife clutched in your hand, your heart a cold drum in your chest. The memory of what happened next, or what did not happen, will stay with you forever. This is your final lesson. You are not just a soldier. You are a killer, and you are ready to take your place in the Spartan phalanx. You survive the cryptia. You return from the wilderness, no longer a boy, but something harder, leaner, and more dangerous. You are a wraith who has passed through the fire and emerged as tempered steel. You are now 20 years old. Your formal education in the Agoge is over. You are a full-blown Spartan warrior. Happily, but your journey into the heart of Spartan male society is just beginning. Passing the trials of the Agoge grants you citizenship, but it does not automatically grant you a seat at the table. To become a true peer, a homo ios, one of the similar S or equals, you must be accepted into a SYS Citian. The SYS Citian is the common mess hall, the military-style dining club that is the absolute cornerstone of a Spartan man's life. It is far more than just a place to eat. It is the primary social, political, and military unit of the Spartan state. Think of it as a fraternity, a military unit's mess, and a political caucus all rolled into one. Your entire adult life will revolve around this group of men. You will train with them, eat with them, and fight beside them in the phalanx. Their acceptance is not a formality. It is essential. The process of joining a SYS Citian is a tense and deeply personal ordeal. You, along with other young graduates of the Agoge, must present yourself as a candidate to an existing mess. The mess typically consists of about 15 men. You stand before them, men who have been your seniors, your mentors, and sometimes your tormentors for your entire life. Now, they will judge you one last time. The voting procedure is what makes this so nerve-wracking. It is a secret ballot, a uniquely Spartan ritual. A steward comes around to each of the existing members with a container. Each member is given a small piece of bread to vote yes for your admission. The member drops the piece of bread into the container as it is. To vote no, he flattens the piece of bread into a disc between his thumb and forefinger before dropping it in. The shape is easily felt, but the vote remains anonymous. This method is a classic example of Spartan ingenuity. Simple, effective, and silent. You wait as the steward makes his rounds. You try to keep your face a mask of indifference, just as you were taught. But inside, your stomach is churning more than it did from the black soup. You scan the faces of the members. Did you impress them during training? Did you show courage? Did you carry your share of the burdens without complaint? Or did you, at some point, show a flicker of weakness, of cowardice, of selfishness? That one of them remembers. This voting system is the key historical fact of this chapter. It was the final gateway to full citizenship status, and the requirements were incredibly strict. According to Plutarch, the vote had to be unanimous. A single flattened piece of bread, a single no vote, was enough to deny you entry. If you were rejected, it was a social catastrophe. You could try to apply to another SYS Citian, but a rejection from one often meant you were blacklisted from all. A man not admitted to a mess became a kind of second-class citizen, an outcast known as a hypomeion, or inferior. He still had to serve in the army, but he was stripped of his honor and political rights. He was a warrior, but not a peer. Now for the grubby little detail of what you were signing up for. The term SYS City means eating together, and that is a literal and mandatory commitment. Every single day, for the next 40 years, you are required to eat your main meal here. But the food is not free. Each member is required to contribute a monthly quota of provisions from his own estate, which is worked by helots. This rash untypically included barley, white, cheese, and figs. If a man failed to make his contribution, perhaps due to a poor harvest or mismanagement of his land, he would be expelled from the mess and lose his citizenship. It was a system that ensured only men of sufficient property, the Spartans, could remain in this exclusive club. You are not just joining a dinner party. You are entering into a lifelong, binding contract. This leads to a fascinating debate among historians about social mobility in Sparta. The traditional view is that Sparta was a rigid, unchanging society. You were either a Spartai, a perioikos, a free non-citizen, or a helot, and that was that. However, the SYS Scythian contribution system suggests a hidden, brutal form of social mobility. A full citizen could, through poverty or misfortune, lose his status and fall into the ranks of the inferiors. This meant the number of full citizens, the homoi, was not fixed. It was constantly at risk of shrinking. Scholars argue about how common this was. Was it a rare occurrence, or a constant threat that kept the Spartan elite lean and ruthless? It challenges the idea of Sparta as a perfectly equal society, revealing a system where economic failure led to political and social death. The steward finishes his collection and empties the bread pieces onto a table for the count. There is a moment of absolute silence. No one looks at the flattened pieces. They only look for them. He sifts through the pile. Then he looks up and gives a slight nod. Not a single piece of bread was flattened. You are in. A wave of relief so profound it almost makes your knees buckle washes over you. You have cleared the final hurdle. You are now a homoi, an equal. You take your designated place at the long wooden table. A bowl of the familiar, stomach-turning black soup is placed before you. But tonight, it tastes different. It tastes like victory. It tastes like belonging. You are finally, truly, a Spartan man. Now that you are a member of the SYS Scythian, you might think you can finally relax a little. You have made it. You are an equal. But you quickly learn that the dining hall has its own rigid set of rules, and a social etiquette as unforgiving as any training drill in the Agoge. The mess hall is a microcosm of Spartan society, and your behavior here is constantly under scrutiny. First, the seating is not random. It is arranged by age and seniority. As a new member, you are at the bottom of the pecking order. You sit at the end of the long, rough-hewn wooden table. You speak only when spoken to. Your role is to listen and learn from the older veterans, men who have seen decades of battle and political maneuvering. Their conversations are your new education. They talk of past campaigns, of politics, of the state of the helots. They tell stories of valor and cowardice. It is here that the unwritten laws and values of Spartan culture are passed down. The fruit is, of course, the same monotonous fare you have grown accustomed to. The centerpiece is always the black soup, served in a communal bowl from which everyone ladles their share. This is accompanied by the barley bread, cheese, and figs that each member contributes. But the portions are strictly, almost scientifically, equalized. No man gets more than another. This is central to the idea of the homoi. In this room, all are peers, and the food reflects that. This enforced equality is a core historical feature of the SYS Scythian. It was meant to prevent the wealth and status symbols that were tearing other Greek cities apart. Here, no one could show off with extravagant food. However, there was one exception to this rule, and it is a fascinating little detail. A small dessert was sometimes permitted, but it was not something the mess provided. It was something you earned. If a man had performed a sacrifice to the gods or had a successful day hunting, he was allowed to bring a small portion of the meat or game to the mess hall to share. This was the only way to get a taste of something other than the usual rations. It was a mark of prestige. a way to show off your piety or your skill as a hunter without breaking the rules of austerity. It also created a subtle form of social currency. The man who frequently brought in a bit of venison or wild boar was held in higher regard than the man who never did. But the most peculiar set of rules revolves around the wine. Wine was a staple of the Greek world, and the Spartans were no exception. It was drunk at every meal, mixed with water in a large crater. But in the Scythian, a young man's relationship with wine was carefully managed, while the older men might drink more freely. You, as a junior member, were watched closely. You were served a small, precisely measured amount of wine. The goal was for you to drink enough to loosen the tongue and cheer the spirit, but not so much as to become drunk. And here is where a truly strange and cruel ritual comes into play. To teach you the evils of drunkenness, the Spartans would sometimes bring a helot into the dining hall. They would force this poor soul to drink a huge quantity of unmixed wine until he was utterly, disgustingly drunk. He would be made to stumble around, to sing ridiculous songs, to say foolish things. He was paraded before you and the other young men as a living example of what happens when a man loses control of himself. It was a lesson in moderation through humiliation, not your humiliation, but the forced humiliation of another. It was a stark, brutal reminder of your superiority and the subjugation of the helot. This practice brings us to an ongoing historical debate. What was the true nature of the laconic wit that was so prized in these dining halls? The Spartans were famous for their brief, pithy, and often cutting remarks. The term laconic comes from Laconia. They're homely. We have many examples of these one-liners from ancient sources. But were these spontaneous flashes of brilliance, or a highly rehearsed and ritualized form of speech? Some scholars argue that the mess hall was a training ground for this wit. The older men would deliberately try to trip up the younger ones with tricky questions or verbal traps. A quick, clever response would earn you respect, while a foolish or long-winded answer would bring shame. It was a form of verbal sparring. Others suggest it was less about wit and more about control, that the brevity of speech was another form of discipline, a way to prevent the descent and endless debate that plagued democratic Athens. Was it a sign of intellectual sharpness or intellectual suppression? You sit at the table, forcing down your bowl of black soup. You listen to the gruff talk of the veterans. You watch as a senior member, returning from a hunt, places a few slices of roasted boar on the table, a prize to be shared among the men he favors. You feel a pang of envy. Later, you watch in grim silence as a terrified helot is made a spectacle for your education. You are careful with your words, speaking only in short, direct sentences. You are learning the complex social dance of being a Spartan equal. It is a world of subtle cues, of unspoken hierarchies, and of brutal lessons. The Agoge, they may have trained your body, but it is the Scythian that will train your soul. As you settle into the rhythm of life in the Scythian, you start to notice the subtle markers of status and age among the men. Since wealth cannot be displayed through fine clothes or jewelry, Spartans found other ways to signal their place in the hierarchy. One of the most prominent is your hair. During your time in the Agoge, your head was kept shaved or your hair was clipped brutishly short. It was a sign of your youth and your subordinate status. It was practical, unadorned, and easy to maintain, which is to say, it required no maintenance at all. But now that you are a full citizen, a warrior, you are expected to grow your hair long. Flowing hair was the exclusive privilege and defining characteristic of the Spartan male. It was a visual symbol that you had graduated from the Agoge and were a free man. A warrior. The helots and the Ikoi were not permitted to grow their hair long in the same fashion. Your long hair was, In essence, your new uniform, a proud declaration of your elite status. So, you let it grow. Over the months and years, it grows past your shoulders, thick and heavy. But this is not some uncanny, world-made. The Spartans were surprisingly meticulous about their long hair. It had to be cared for. It had to be clean. And, most importantly, it had to be combed. This is a major historical point, famously noted by the historian Herodotus. In his account of the Battle of Thermopylae, he tells the story of a Persian scout who snuck up on the Spartan camp and was stunned by what he saw. He expected to find the Spartans sharpening their swords or planning strategy. Instead, he found them calmly and methodically combing and dressing their long hair as if preparing for a festival. When he reported this back to the Persian king Xerxes, the king was baffled. He could not understand why these warriors were engaged in what seemed like a vain, cosmetic ritual right before a battle to the death. A Greek exile had to explain it to him. When the Spartans are about to risk their life, they first adorn their heads. It was a ritual of preparation, a way of mentally centering themselves before combat. It was also an act of supreme confidence, a gesture of contempt for the enemy. It said, "We are so unafraid of you that we have time for personal grooming." Now for the oily and slightly less glamorous detail. How did you maintain such glorious locks in an otherwise filthy society? The answer is olive oil. While you would not waste precious oil on your skin for a luxurious bath, you would use it on your hair. You would work olive oil into your long tresses to keep them from getting too brittle and to give them a healthy sheen. While this sounds nice, imagine what it was actually like. You are a soldier living a rough, outdoor life. You are covering your hair in a layer of oil. Now, think of all the dust, dirt, and pollen that would get stuck in that oily hair. It would quickly become a greasy, heavy dirt magnet. The regular combing was not just for looks. It was a practical necessity to try and remove the debris and tangles from your oil-soaked mane. You might look magnificent from a distance, but up close, your glorious hair was probably a sticky, gritty mess. This brings us to a curious point of debate for historians and archaeologists. What did this hairstyle actually look like? The written sources tell us it was lengthened, that it was elaborately dressed before battle. But what does dressed mean? Was it braided? Was it tied back in a specific type of knot or ponytail? Artistic depictions on pottery and sculpture from the period show a variety of styles. Some vases show Spartan warriors with their hair in multiple long, thin braids, almost like dreadlocks. Others show it tied in a simple club at the nape of the neck. Statues sometimes depict more elaborate, curled styles. The reality is that the Spartan hairstyle probably was not one single, uniform look. It may have varied by age, family tradition, or even personal preference. Scholars are constantly comparing the literary descriptions with the archaeological evidence, trying to piece together the lost world of Spartan hairdressing. It is a surprisingly complex field of study. You now spend a part of each day tending to your hair. You sit in the sun outside the barracks, your wooden comb in hand, slowly working through the long, oil-stiffened strands. It is a quiet, meditative ritual. It connects you to the generations of Spartan warriors who came before you. It is one of the few acts of personal care you are allowed, one of the few vanities permitted in your austere world. Your hands are calloused from the spear and the sword, but they learn to be gentle with your hair. It is a paradox you have come to embody, a brutal warrior engaged in an act of delicate self-adornment. Your long hair is a symbol of your freedom, your status, and your readiness to die. And as you prepare for your first real campaign, you will take extra care, combing it until it shines. The final, beautiful gesture of defiance. Your life is now one of constant readiness. The threat of a helot revolt from within or an enemy attack from without means the Spartan army must be prepared to mobilize at a moment's notice. Your equipment, your spear, your short sword FOS, your bronze helmet, and your heavy shield aspiz is kept in a state of constant, gleaming perfection. But there is one piece of equipment that remains as unkempt and utilitarian as ever. Your red cloak. The Fowenike is, by now, your cloak is no longer the bright crimson garment you received as a boy. Years of sun, rain, sweat, and grime have faded it to a dusty, brownish red. It is frayed at the edges and patched in places. It carries the permanent, musky scent of your life as a soldier. It is still your primary garment, worn over a simple tunic now that you are an adult. It is your blanket on campaign and your shield against the elements. But it serves another, more gruesome purpose on the battlefield. The famous reason for the red color of the cloak is, as you learned long ago, a matter of battlefield psychology. It was intended to hide the color of blood. This is the mainstream historical knowledge that everyone knows about Sparta. The idea was that seeing your comrades bleeding profusely could cause panic and break the phalanx formation. The crimson cloak made wounds less visible, helping to maintain morale in the terrifying, uniform appearance of the Spartan line. It projected an image of an unstoppable, unbloodied wall of bronze and red. But there is a secret, more personal, and deeply ingrained reason for the cloak that every Spartan warrior understands. The cloak is a master of hiding things, and not just blood. It hides the filth of the campaign trail. It hides the gauntness of your body from meager rations. And most importantly, it allows you to hide an injury with dignity. This is the grim, unspoken detail in the rigid hierarchy of Spartan manlines. Showing pain or weakness is still a cardinal sin, even in battle. If you take a minor wound, a deep gash on your arm, a spear thrust to the thigh, the natural instinct is to cry out, to falter. But you cannot. You are expected to stand your ground, to keep your place in the line, as long as you are physically able. Your red cloak is your accomplice in this deception. You can discreetly pull the fabric over a bleeding wound, letting the thick wool absorb the blood. Its red color masks the fresh stain. You can hide your injury from the man standing next to you, and more importantly, from the enemy in front of you. It allows you to maintain the facade of invulnerability, to pretend you are unharmed for just a little longer. It is a tool for maintaining your personal honor, even as your life is seeping away. This leads to a fascinating and somewhat macabre debate among military historians. Did this hiding the blood strategy actually work? From a psychological perspective, perhaps the uniform, bloody red appearance of the phalanx would have been terrifying. But from a practical, medical standpoint, it might have been disastrous. A soldier who is actively hiding a wound is a soldier who is not getting immediate attention. A deep cut that might have been treatable if dealt with quickly could become fatal if the soldier ignores it to maintain his honor, continuing to fight until he collapses from blood loss or shock. The same cloak that hid the wound would become a dirty, unhygienic bandage, introducing all sorts of bacteria into the injury. So, scholars debate whether this famous feature of Spartan warfare ultimately saved more lives by boosting morale or cost more lives by discouraging soldiers from seeking timely aid. Was it a brilliant psychological ploy, or a deadly manifestation of their obsession with toughness? You stand in formation, the sun glinting off the bronze of your shield. The weight of your helmet is familiar, the shaft of your spear comfortable in your hand. Your red cloak is heavy on your shoulders. It feels less like a piece of clothing and more like a part of you, an extension of your hardened will. You look at the men to your left and right. They are your brothers from the Agoge and the Spartan. Their cloaks are just as faded and worn as yours. Each cloak tells a story of survival, of shared hardship. It is a symbol of your collective identity. But you also know that each cloak is a private sanctuary of secrets. It might be hiding the trembling of a nervous young warrior, or the grimace of an old veteran with an aching joint. And soon, on the battlefield, it will hide fresh wounds. The cloak is both a symbol of your unity and the guardian of your individual silent suffering. It is a perfect garment for a Spartan warrior, public in its statement of identity, but private in its concealment of weakness. Sometime in your 20s, probably after you have secured your place in a Spartan, you are expected to do something else to serve the state. Get married. This is not a matter of romance or personal choice. It is your civic duty. Sparta needed a continuous supply of healthy, strong boys to feed into the Agoge and become the next generation of warriors. Your marriage is, first and foremost, a transaction to produce state assets. You do not choose your wife based on love or attraction. Marriages are typically arranged by the father of the bride or by the elders. The primary criteria are good breeding. You are looking for a woman from a respectable family, one known for producing strong, healthy children. Spartan women were famously robust and athletic, educated at the expense of the state in their own system of physical training. The belief was that strong mothers would produce strong sons. So, your future wife is likely a woman you have seen at public festivals, a formidable figure in her own right. But the wedding ceremony itself is one of the strangest, most secretive rituals in the Greek world. There is no public celebration, no feast, no exchange of vows in front of the community. Your marriage is initiated through a ritual of abduction. On a designated night, you will go to the home of your bride-to-be in. With the collusion of her family, you will abduct her. It is a stage, symbolic kidnapping. You carry her away from her family home and take her to a dark, secluded location. Meanwhile, a bridesmaid has prepared your new wife for this encounter. She has shaved the head of your wife, dressed her in a man's cloak and sandals, and left her lying in a darkened room on a simple reed mat. This is the mainstream historical account of a Spartan wedding, a bizarre rite of passage described by Plutarch. You, a full-grown warrior, sneak into this room. Your first marital encounter is a brief, furtive, and almost silent affair conducted in near total darkness. It is designed to be as undomestic and unromantic as possible. After this strange consummation, you do not stay the night. You do not wake up with your new wife. You get up, get dressed, and sneak back to your military barracks to sleep with the other men of your Spartan, as if nothing has happened. This is the truly weird and hygienic, a questionable part of early Spartan married life. For the first several years of your marriage, this is how you will see your wife. You are a full-time soldier, living in the barracks. She continues to live in her family's home, and later, in your home, but you do not live there with her. Your marriage exists only in these stolen moments. You have to sneak out of the barracks at night, visit your wife in secret, and then return before dawn so that your comrades do not know you were gone. Being seen leaving the house of your wife would be a source of great shame. It would imply that you were controlled by your desires, that you were a woman his age. Your primary loyalty in your entire social life must remain with the men of your mess hall. A successful marriage, in the early years, was one that was kept almost entirely secret. Some ancient sources even claim that many Spartan men had fathered several children before they ever saw the face of their wife in daylight. This leads to a fascinating debate among social historians and anthropologists. What was the purpose of this incredibly strange system? Why all the secrecy? One theory is that it was designed to maintain the edge of the warrior. By making contact with women difficult and furtive, it kept the men from going soft, from becoming too domesticated. Their energy and focus were meant to remain on military matters and the bonds with their fellow soldiers. Another theory is that it was a strange form of population control or eugenics. The idea was that the desire between husband and wife would be stronger if their encounters were errand forbidden, supposedly leading to more vigorous and healthy offspring. A more cynical view is that it was simply another to love state control, ensuring that a man's primary allegiance was always to his military unit, not his family. Scholars still argue whether this system produced stronger soldiers or just emotionally stunted husbands and fathers. You lie on your reed bed in the barracks, surrounded by the snoring unshifting of your comrades. The moon is high. You wait until the deepest point of the night, when you are sure everyone is asleep. You slip out of the barracks like a shadow, your bare feet silent on the cold ground. You navigate the dark streets of Sparta, your senses on high alert. You are not just a husband visiting his wife. You are a commando on a covert operation. You spend a short time in the quiet darkness of your own home, a place that feels more foreign to you than the barracks. Then, long before the first hint of dawn, you slip away again, back to your real life, your real home, the communal, all-male world of the Spartan army. Your marriage is a secret. Your family is a rumor. Your duty is your only reality. Your daily routine is governed by a singular focus. The art of war. Every waking moment is, in some way, dedicated to honing your skills as a hoplite. A significant portion of your day is dedicated not to your own body, but to the meticulous care of your panoply, your suit of arms. In the strange hierarchy of Spartan hygiene, your equipment is far more important and kept far cleaner than you are. You sit in the dusty courtyard of the barracks, the Greek sun beating down on your bare back. In front of you, laid out on a piece of leather, are the tools of your trade. Your bronze helmet, shaped to cover your entire head and face, leaving only your eyes visible. Your bronze greaves, which protect your shins. Your heavy, bowl-shaped shield, the spears, made of wooden faced with a thin layer of gleaming bronze. And your primary weapons, the larn, leaf-bladed spear in the short, vicious sword. This gear is your life. In the phalanx, it protects you and the man standing next to you. Its maintenance is a sacred duty. You spend hours polishing the bronze. You use a piece of rough cloth and fines, or ash to scrub away any tarnish, any spot of corrosion. The goal is to make it shine so brightly that it will reflect the sun and dazzle your enemies. A polished shield is not just for show. It is a psychological weapon. An army whose bronze gleams is an army that is disciplined, confident, and terrifying. This obsessive care for equipment is a well-documented historical fact. Xenophon, our pro-Spartan source, praised this diligence. A Spartan warrior's personal honor was tied to the state of his gear. A man with a dented helmet or a tarnished shield was a man who was careless, and a careless soldier was a liability. The shield, in particular, was an object of immense symbolic importance. It was so large and heavy, it was useless if you broke formation and ran. The famous saying Spartan mothers told their sons as they left for war, "Return with your shield door on it," underscores this. Returning without your shield meant you had dropped it to flee, the ultimate act of cowardice. Returning on it meant you had died bravely and your comrades were carrying your body home on it like a stretcher. Now for the grimy little contrast. while you spend hours making your bronze shine. You spend mere moments on your own body. You might take a quick, shocking plunge in the URTAS, but there is no polishing your own skin. The nicks and scars on your body are signs of toughness, but a scratch on your shield is a sign of neglect. And let us think about the inside of that helmet. It is a snug, form-fitting piece of bronze. On the inside, there is likely some form of thin leather or felt lining, but it is minimal. Now, imagine wearing this helmet for hours on end during drills or in battle. Under the hot Mediterranean sun, you are sweating profusely. That sweat pours down your face and soaks into the lining. Your oily, probably not very clean hair is pressed up against it. The inside of your helmet becomes a dark, damp, sweaty environment, the perfect breeding ground for bacteria. After a few hours of use, the stench inside that helmet must have been breathtaking. It would be a concentrated aroma of stale sweat, hair oil, and old leather. Yet, well, you would be punished for not polishing the outside. No one seemed to care about the festering biological experiment happening on the inside. The exterior gleamed with honor, while the interior reeked of reality. This stark contrast leads to a fascinating debate among military historians. Was this focus on external appearance over personal or internal hygiene a tactical choice or a cultural tick? Some argue it was purely for psychological warfare. The gleam of the armor, the uniform red of the cloaks, the terrifying anonymity of the Corinthian helmets. It was all part of a carefully constructed image, designed to break the will of the enemy before the first spear was even thrown. In this view, the personal competent hygiene of the soldier were irrelevant as long as the brand of the Spartan warrior was maintained. Others argue that it reflects a deeper aspect of the Spartan mindset. They were a society obsessed with surfaces and appearances, not in a vain way, but in a symbolic one. The shiny shield represented a shiny, unblemished honor. The disciplined exterior of the phalanx represented the internal discipline of the state. What was inside, the individual soldier's pain, fear, or filth, was meant to be suppressed and ignored. The debate is about whether their hygiene practices were a means to a military end or an end in themselves, a physical manifestation of their core ideology. You finish your work. Your shield is a golden mirror. You can see your own distorted reflection in it. A faceless, menacing silhouette crowned with a horsehair crest. You run your thumb along the sharpened edge of your sword. It is flawless. You, on the other hand, are caked in a fine layer of dust. Your hands are grimy from the polishing, and you smell faintly of sweat and sour wine. You stand up and assemble your panoply. When you put it on, you are transformed. Your personal grime is hidden beneath a shell of immaculate, terrifying bronze. You are no longer a man. You are a component. You are a piece of state-of-the-art, 5th century BC military hardware. And in Sparta, that is a far greater thing to be. In a society that worships physical perfection and endurance, what happens when your body inevitably fails you? What happens when you get sick? In Sparta, falling ill is not just a medical problem. It is a social and ideological crisis. Sickness is seen as a form of weakness, a stain on your honor, and a failure of your duty to the state. Your body is not your own. It is a weapon belonging to Sparta, and a weapon that is broken or malfunctioning is a liability. From your first days in the Agoge, you were conditioned to ignore pain and discomfort. A fever, a stomach ache. These were things to be endured in silence. To complain was to be shamed. This attitude carries over into your adult life as a warrior. You are expected to be tougher than any common ailment. This cultural disdain for sickness is a core historical aspect of the Spartan psyche. While other Greek societies developed sophisticated medical theories and had famous physicians like Hippocrates, the Spartans lagged far behind. They had military surgeons, or aetroi, who were skilled at treating the visible, honorable wounds of battle, spear thrusts, sword cuts, broken bones. These were seen as the acceptable form of physical damage. But internal medicine, the treatment of diseases and illnesses, was deeply neglected and viewed with suspicion. When you do fall ill with something you cannot simply ignore, a raging fever, a violent intestinal upset, a lung infection, there is no sick bay, no gentle nursing. Your treatment options are rudimentary and rooted in the same hardened-up philosophy that governs the rest of your life. The first course of action is often to just sweat it out, to prove you can beat it through sheer force of will. You might be given herbal remedies, simple concoctions of local plants passed down through folk tradition, but their effectiveness is dubious at best. Here is a bizarre and telling little detail about Spartan healthcare. One of their go-to cures for a variety of ailments was wine, not just for drinking, but for bathing. The belief, mentioned by ancient sources, was that bathing a sick person in wine could reveal the severity of their illness. It was thought that a truly sick person would react badly or even perish from the wine bath, similar to the test administered to infants. For less severe conditions, wine was used as a disinfectant for wounds, which is actually somewhat effective due to the alcohol content, but also prescribed for internal ailments, often in large quantities. So, if you had a bad cough, the prescription might very well be to get drunk, a stark contrast to the usual lessons on moderation. It is a kind of desperate, kill-or-cure approach to medicine. This brings us to a significant point of debate among historians of medicine and science. Was the Spartan approach to health a complete failure, or did it have some hidden strengths? The traditional view is that it was a disaster. By shaming the sick, discouraging medical innovation, and relying on brutal folk remedies, they likely had a high mortality rate from preventable diseases. The constant physical stress, poor nutrition, and unsanitary living conditions would have made them highly susceptible to epidemics. Sickness, not battle, may have been the biggest killer of Spartans. However, our revisionist argument adjusts a different perspective. By weeding out the physically weak from birth and through the brutal Agoge, the surviving adult Spartan population may have been, on average, genetically more robust and possessed stronger immune systems than other Greeks. Their austere lifestyle, free from the overindulgences and urban crowding of a city like Athens, might have protected them from certain diseases of civilization. Furthermore, their emphasis on physical fitness and outdoor living was, in its own way, a form of preventative medicine. The debate centers on whether their survival of the fittest model created a healthier population overall, despite the lack of effective medical care for those who did fall ill. Did the brutality of the system inadvertently create a super-resilient gene pool, or did it just mask a constant, quiet death toll from disease? You lie on your reed mat in the barracks, a fire burning in your chest and a cold sweat on your brow. Every breath is a ragged, painful effort. You try to stifle your coughs, burying your face in your cloak, so you do not disturb the other men. They pretend not to notice, but you can feel their subtle avoidance. You are a disruption. You are a weakness in the wall. An older warrior comes over, not with sympathy, but with a grim look of assessment. He hands you a water skin filled with rough, sour wine and tells you to drink. It is not an act of kindness. It is an order. You are being ordered to get better or, perhaps, to get it over with. There is no comfort here. only the cold logic of the state. Your value is measured by your ability to stand in the phalanx. And as you lie there, shivering and alone in a crowded room, you understand that to be sick in Sparta is to be, for a time, functionally useless, and there is no greater shame than that. The call to war finally comes. It might be a campaign against a rival city-state, like Athens or Argos, or it might be a punitive expedition to crush a Helot rebellion in the fertile plains of Messeniae. The disciplined chaos of mobilization begins. You gather your gleaming panoply, your rations of barley and cheese, and your trusty red cloak. The army assembles and begins its march, and it is on this march that you will face one of the most basic, undignified, and universal challenges of human existence: going to the bathroom. There are no portable toilets, no designated latrines following the army. The campaign trail is your bathroom. The process is primitive, public, and fraught with peril. When nature calls, you cannot simply wander off into the woods for privacy. The Spartan army on the march is a highly disciplined formation. To leave the line without permission is a serious offense. You must wait for a designated halt, when the army does stop for a rest. The process is a strange mix of discipline and chaos. There is not a specific, cordoned-off area for relief. Essentially, the side of the road or the edge of the campsite becomes a communal, open-air toilet. Hundreds, sometimes thousands, of men are relieving themselves in roughly the same area. The concept of privacy is, as with everything else in your life, a complete non-issue. You learn to squat and do your business with the same stony-faced indifference you apply to eating black soup or sleeping on reeds. This lack of sanitation is a key historical feature of ancient warfare in general, but it was particularly acute for a large, marching army. The sheer amount of human waste deposited by an army on the move was staggering. This created a massive and immediate public health hazard. The area around any campsite would quickly become a foul-smelling minefield of filth. This brings us to a disgustingly practical detail that ancient military manuals sometimes addressed: the direction of the wind. When choosing a campsite for the night, a competent commander had to consider many things: access to water, defensible terrain, but he also had to consider the wind. If he set up camp with the latrine area upwind, the stench would blow through the entire camp all night, making sleep unbearable and spreading foul air that was believed to cause disease. The miasma theory. A smart commander always placed the communal toilet downwind. It is a small, unheroic detail that would have had a massive impact on the morale and health of the troops. Furthermore, you do not have toilet paper. Your options are limited and unpleasant. You might use a handful of leaves, a smooth stone, or a sponge on a stick if you were exceptionally well prepared. A practice more common with the Romans later on. More likely, you would just use your left hand and then attempt to rinse it with a bit of water from your canteen, if you could spare it. This practice is why, in many cultures throughout history, the left hand was considered unclean and reserved for such tasks, while the right hand was used for eating. For you, a Spartan soldier, it is just another unpleasant necessity. The risk of contaminating your food or water supply with your own unwashed hands is enormous, making dysentery, known grimly as the flux, the single greatest killer of soldiers in the pre-modern world. More soldiers died from disease contracted in filthy camps than were ever killed by enemy swords or spears. This reality of campaign life leads to a significant debate among military and environmental historians. How did ancient armies manage their own pollution? Did they have any systematic approach to waste disposal? Or was it a complete free-for-all? Some sources suggest that in more permanent Roman forts, elaborate latrine systems were built. But for a Greek army on the march, The evidence is scarce. Some scholars argue there must have been some rudimentary rules of camp hygiene, like burying waste, to prevent catastrophic outbreaks of disease. They suggest that the survival of these armies proves some level of practical sanitation must have existed. Others contend that the ancient world was simply a much filthier place, and that people had, through constant exposure, developed stronger stomachs and immunities. They argue that armies simply accepted a high level of attrition from disease as a normal cost of doing business. The truth is likely that practices varied greatly depending on the commander, the length of the campaign, and the terrain. You are on a short halt. The army has stopped beside a dusty road. You move to the edge of the column with a dozen other men. There is no conversation, no acknowledgement of the humbling, animalistic act you are all engaged in. You stare blankly at the olive groves in the distance, trying to detach your mind from the situation. The ground around you is already fouled by the men who marched at the front of the column. The smell is acrid. This is the reality of war, the part that the poets and storytellers leave out. It is not the clash of bronze or the heroic charge. It is the gnawing hunger, the aching feet, the constant filth, and the ever-present threat of a sickness that can lay you low more effectively than any enemy warrior. You finish your business, readjust your cloak, and rejoin the ranks, a little lighter, but no cleaner. The march continues. The enemy is near. The scouts have returned, and the moment of truth is at hand. The marching stops. Your unit moves into its position, part of the larger phalanx. The air grows thick with tension. The usual rough housing and laconic jokes of the men fall silent. This is the liminal space before battle, a sacred and terrifying time, and you engage in one of the most famous and perplexing Spartan pre-battle rituals. You begin to groom yourselves, while other armies might be giving rousing speeches, sacrificing animals, or frantically checking their gear one last time. You and your comrades find a spot on the ground, sit down, and begin to carefully comb and dress your long, oily hair. From a distance, it would look like the camp was preparing for a banquet, not a bloodbath. As you learned it years ago, this is a tradition steeped in meaning. It is a display of Andrea, mad lines, and contempt for the enemy. It is a meditative act, a way of finding a calm center in the storm of your own adrenaline. You take out your comb, a simple tool carved from wood or bone that you carry with you on every campaign, and you begin the slow, deliberate process of working it through your long hair. You might trade on it, or perhaps you and the man next to you will help each other braid it into the intricate styles favored for combat. This act of communal grooming is the central historical fact of this moment, as recorded by Herodotus before Thermopylae confirmed by other sources like Xenophon. It was a defining feature of the Spartan warriors' approach to battle, a unique blend of dandyism and deadly intent. It was so distinctive that it became a part of their fearsome reputation. Now, let us zoom in on a small, practical, and slightly gross detail of this ritual. As you are combing your hair, what else are you combing out? Lice? Head lice were an inescapable part of life in the ancient world, especially for soldiers living in crowded, unsanitary conditions with long hair. This pre-battle combing session was not just a symbolic act. It was also a practical opportunity for a bit of delicizing. The olive oil you used in your hair might have helped to suffocate some of the lice, making them easier to remove. So as you sit there, projecting an aura of calm, God-like indifference, you are also quietly, methodically picking parasites out of your own and your friend's hair. It is a moment of supreme martial coolness, undercut by the mundane reality of personal pest control. The hero and the vermin, coexisting in a single ritual. This bizarre practice has led to a long-standing debate among historians and psychologists. Was the pre-battle grooming a genuine psychological tool? Or was it a form of ritualistic obsession? A kind of collective coping mechanism? One school of thought argues that it was a highly effective form of psychological preparation. The slow, repetitive motion of combing is inherently calming. It would have lowered heart rates, controlled breathing, and helped the soldiers manage their fear. By focusing on a familiar, non-combat task, they could enter a state of calm focus, a flow state, before the chaos erupted. It was a form of battle meditation. The opposing view is that it was a deeply ingrained superstition, a ritual that had to be performed correctly for the soldiers to feel that they had the favor of the gods and that everything was in its proper place. In this interpretation, it is less about practical psychology and more about magical thinking. If they did not perform the ritual, they might feel that they were unlucky or unprepared on a spiritual level. The debate essentially boils down to this. Were the Spartans master psychologists who had developed a sophisticated technique for fear management? Or were they highly superstitious warriors clinging to an ancient tradition whose original meaning may have even been lost to them? Was it middenfulsons or magic? You finish combing your hair. It is now neat, tightly bound, and out of your face. You feel a strange sense of peace settle over you. The fear is still there, a cold knot in your stomach, but it is now at a distance. You have performed the ritual. You have put your head in order. You are ready. You look at the man next to you. His hair is also perfectly dressed. He gives you a short, sharp nod. There is a shared understanding that needs no words. You are both about to walk into the meat grinder of hoplite warfare, where your life expectancy might be measured in minutes. But you will do so looking your best. You will do so with adorned heads and calm hearts. You stand up, pick up your heavy shield, and take your place in the line. The time for grooming is over. The time for killing has begun. The battle is a maelstrom of noise, dust, and terror. It is the oldest moss, the push, as the two phalanxes slam into each other. It is a shoving match with 8-foot spears. The sound is a deafening orchestra of screams. The clash of bronze on bronze. The sickening crunch of spear points on shields and flesh. You are not an individual fighter. You are a cog in a machine of violence. Your shield protecting the man to your left. His shield protecting you. You jab your spear over and under the wall of shields, aiming for a face, a throat, a thigh. And then it happens. A moment of chaos. A gap in the line, and a searing, white-hot pain erupts in your shoulder. An enemy spearhead has punched through the bronze facing of your shield and bit undeep into your flesh. The shock is so intense it almost makes you drop your spear. Your first instinct is to recoil, to scream, to look at the damage. But you cannot. You are in the phalanx. You hold the line. When the battle is over, whether in victory or retreat, the grim work of battlefield medicine begins. There are no sterile field hospitals, no medics with clean bandages and morphine. Your first aid is as brutal and pragmatic as every other aspect of your life. The first step is to get the weapon out. If it is a shallow cut, it is straightforward. But if the spearhead is lodged deep in the muscle or, worse, has a barb, it is a nightmare. The honorable way to deal with this, as mentioned in ancient texts, was for a comrade to place his foot on your chest for leverage and pull the shaft out with all his might. The pain is unimaginable. You are expected to bear it without screaming. Once the object is removed, the wound needs to be cleaned. This is the key historical moment of Spartan first aid. The primary disinfectant available was wine. A comrade will unstop his water skin which likely contains cheap, sour wine, and pour it directly into your open, bleeding wound. The alcohol in the wine would have had some antiseptic properties, killing some of the surface bacteria. It was one of the most effective treatments they had. The stinging sensation is excruciating. Another test of your endurance. After the wind wash, a wound needs to be dressed. There are no sterile gauze pads. You use what you have. This often meant tearing a strip of cloth from your own tunic or cloak, a piece of fabric that is already filthy from the march into battle. This dirty rag is then packed into the wound or tied tightly around it to stop the bleeding. Sometimes, a mixture of oil and wine was used to create a kind of salve, or crushed herbs might be applied, their effectiveness based more on folklore than fact. Now, for a particularly strange and stomach-turning detail of ancient wound care: the use of cobwebs. For centuries, a common folk remedy for a bleeding wound was to pack it with cobwebs. It sounds like a recipe for a massive infection, and it probably often was. However, there is a tiny kernel of science to it. Cobwebs, or more specifically, the silk from certain spiders, are rich in vitamin K, which is a natural coagulant that helps blood to clot. Furthermore, the web itself can have some minor antibiotic and antifungal properties. So, while it seems utterly unhygienic, packing a wound with a dusty old cobweb found in a barn might have actually helped to stop the bleeding faster. It was a desperate gamble, trading the risk of blood loss for the risk of a nasty infection. This primitive approach to medicine leads to a major debate among medical historians. How effective were these battlefield surgeons? The I.A. Roy. The traditional view, influenced by the grand reputation of Spartan warriors, is that they must have been highly skilled in treating trauma. They would have had extensive practical experience with every kind of gruesome injury imaginable. They would have known how to set bones, stitch wounds using bronze needles and linen thread, and perhaps even perform rudimentary amputations. They were specialists in the medicine of violence. However, a more critical view suggests their skills were severely limited by their lack of scientific understanding. Without any knowledge of germ theory, their practices were a life or death crapshoot. For every wound they successfully treated, how many became lethally infected because of a dirty knife, an unwashed hand, or a filthy bandage? How many men survived the spear of the enemy only to die a week later from gangrene or tetanus? The Spartans were experts at inflicting wounds, but the evidence that they were equally expert at healing them is thin. Their focus was always on the strength of the soldier, not the science of the physician. Survival was often attributed to the own toughness of the man rather than the skill of the surgeon. Your comrade finishes tying the crude bandage around your shoulder. The red of your cloak is already turning a darker shade of crimson as the blood soaks through. The pain is a throbbing, relentless drumbeat. There is no pain relief, no anesthetic. There is only the grim acceptance of your reality. You have been wounded. You have survived the immediate battle. Now begins a new battle, a silent, internal one against the invisible enemies of infection and fever. And this is a battle you must fight largely on your own. The campaign drags on. You are not garrisoned in a comfortable fort with reliable supplies. You are living off the land, constantly on the move. Your wound throbs with a dull, persistent ache. But the most pressing and constant need for the entire army is not medicine, but water. Finding a safe, reliable source of drinking water is a daily, life or death gamble. You cannot simply drink from any river or stream you come across. An army of thousands of men, along with its baggage animals, leaves a massive trail of pollution. The same river that might look clear and inviting could be contaminated with human and animal waste from a unit that camped just a few miles upstream. Drinking from the wrong source is a direct route to dysentery, cholera, or typhoid, the invisible killers that stalk every army. The search for water is a critical part of the daily routine. Scouts are sent out not just to look for the enemy, but to find springs, wells, or clean-looking streams. The quality of the water is judged by primitive and often unreliable methods. You look to see if it is clear, if it has a bad smell, if animals are drinking from it. These are indicators, but not guarantees, of safety. This reliance on foraging for water is a fundamental aspect of pre-modern military logistics. While soldiers carried some water in skins or canteens, it was never enough for more than a day or so. An army's route was often dictated not by the flattest terrain or the most direct path, but by the location of known water sources. A commander who led his army into a dry region without a plan was committing them to a slow, agonizing death. Now for a specific, and rather ingenious, little trick the Greeks used to try and purify their water. They did not have chemical tablets or fancy filters, but they had wine. It was common practice to mix a small amount of wine into their drinking water. This was not just to improve the taste of stagnant water, though it certainly helped with that. It was an empirical form of disinfection. The alcohol and, more importantly, the high acidity of the wine would kill some of the harmful bacteria and pathogens present in the water. They had no idea why it worked. They did not know about germs, but they knew from generations of experience that men who drank their water mixed with wine were less likely to get sick than those who drank it straight. It was one of the most effective public health measures of the ancient world, discovered entirely by trial and error. This brings us to a compelling debate among environmental historians and military strategists. Was access to water ever used as a deliberate weapon of war in the ancient Greek world? The sources are not always explicit, but the tactic is as old as warfare itself. A retreating army could deliberately foul a well by throwing a dead animal into it, rendering it unusable for the pursuing force. An army besieging a city would make capturing the primary water source of the city, like a spring or an aqueduct, its top priority. Some scholars argue that many campaign decisions that seem strange from a purely tactical perspective can be explained by the hydraulic imperative, the overriding need to control water. They re-examine battles and sieges through the lens of water access, suggesting it was often the unspoken, critical factor in determining victory or defeat. Others argue that while important, it was just one of many logistical concerns, and that we should not overstate its case as a primary driver of strategy. The debate highlights how easily we can overlook the most basic human needs when we focus only on the dramatic clashes of armies. Tonight, your canteen is almost empty. The water you were issued this morning is gone. Your thirst is a dry, scratchy feeling in the back of your throat, made worse by the low-grade fever from your infected shoulder wound. A scout returns to camp with good news. He has found a small spring a half-mile away. You and a few other men are given the duty of refiling the company's water skins. You walk through the dark, your feet stumbling on the uneven ground. You arrive at the spring, a small trickle of water seeping from a rock face into a muddy pool. It is not much, but it is life. You push aside the scum on the surface and dip your water skin in, filling it with the cool, gritty liquid. Before you drink, you unstop the small skin of sour wine you carry and pour a generous splash into the water. You swish it around. Say a silent prayer to whatever god or spirit might be listening, and take a long, deep drink. It tastes of earth, wine, and survival. For one more day, you have won the battle against thirst. The battle was a victory, but a costly one. The enemy has been routed. and the field is yours. But as the adrenaline fades, it is replaced by a profound, hollow exhaustion. The ground is littered with the grim aftermath of the fight. Broken shields, shattered spears, and the bodies of the fallen, both theirs and ours. Now begins one of the most solemn and physically demanding tasks a soldier faces, dealing with the dead. This is a sacred duty, deeply ingrained in Greek culture. Leaving the body of a comrade to be scavenged by dogs and crows was an unthinkable act of impiety. It condemned his spirit to wander restlessly, unable to enter the underworld. So, before you can rest, before you can properly tend to your own wounds, you must retrieve your fallen brothers. You walk across the silent, churned-up earth of the battlefield. The groans of the wounded have mostly faded, replaced by an eerie quiet. You and the other survivors move in small groups, searching for the familiar red cloaks among the dead. When you find one of your own, the process is simple and grimly practical. You check for any sign of life. If there is none, you begin the hard work of recovery. A fully armored hoplite is incredibly heavy. The bronze squares, helmet, greaves, and shield add a significant amount of weight to the dead weight of the body. You and another soldier grab the body by the arms and legs and begin the laborious process of carrying it back to the designated collection point behind your lines. It is back-breaking work, made worse by your own fatigue and the emotional toll of carrying a man who, just hours before, was alive and standing next to you. This recovery of the dead is a fundamental historical aspect of hoplite warfare. The victors of a battle were granted the right to collect and bury their dead. To be denied this right was the ultimate humiliation for the defeated. Truces were often called for the sole purpose of allowing both sides to perform this grim task. Now for a specific, and rather macabre, detail of this process. What happens to the armor and weapons of the fallen, both yours and the enemy's? They are not buried with the body. This equipment was incredibly valuable. A full set of bronze armor was a significant investment, often passed down from father to son. After a battle, one of the first tasks was to strip the bodies, both friendly and enemy, of all usable gear. This process was called eskylosis, or spoiling. You would pull the heavy bronze squares off a cooling corpse, unstrap the greaves from a lifeless leg, and pry the sword from a hand locked in a death grip. Your own fallen comrade's gear would be collected and redistributed by the state to a new recruit. The enemy's armor was taken as booty, a trophy of war. The best sets might be dedicated as an offering at a temple to the gods, a public display of your victory. So, the battlefield became a scene of industrial-scale recycling, a grim and bloody process of reclaiming valuable metal from the dead. This practice leads to a debate among historians and archaeologists about Spartan burial customs specifically, the general Greek practice, especially for Athenians, was to either bring the bones of the war dead home for a grand public funeral or to bury them in a mass grave. Apollyon Duran. On the battlefield. But what did the Spartans do? The writer Plutarch claims that the Spartans had a unique rule. Only two types of people were allowed to have their names inscribed on their gravestones: men who died in battle, and women who died in childbirth. This suggests an immense cultural value placed on dying for the state. However, he also tells us that the bodies of Spartans who died in battle were typically buried on the spot, wrapped in their red cloaks. Only men who died in truly significant battles, like the famous 300 at Thermopylae, were given special honor. So, scholars debate the reality of Spartan funerary practices. Was every soldier who fell in a minor skirmish given a marked grave? Or was that honor reserved for specific circumstances? Archaeological evidence for Spartan graves is notoriously sparse, as their graves were deliberately simple and unadorned. This fits their austere philosophy, but it makes it difficult for us to verify the claims of ancient writers. Were the fallen brought home, or were they left in foreign soil? Their only monument the memory of their courage. To bury them where they fall policy seems practical for distant campaigns. But what about battles fought closer to home? The exact protocol remains a mystery, shrouded by the characteristic secrecy of Sparta and lack of interest in creating lasting monuments. You lay the last of your fallen comrades down in a neat row. Their faces are pale and peaceful, a stark contrast to the violence of their reign. Their armor has been removed, leaving them clad only in their torn and bloody tunics. Someone has covered each of them with their iconic red cloak, a final gesture of respect. They are no longer individual men, no longer your friend Lycurgus or your messmate Pausanias. They are now an offering to the state, a testament to its strength. You stand for a moment, leaning on your spear, your whole body aching. You look at the row of red bundles on the ground, and you know that your own fate could have easily been the same. There is no glory in this moment, only a profound and weary sadness. The war is over. The campaign was a success. You are marching home, not with the tense readiness of the advance, but with the weary, shuffling gait of survivors. You are going home a hero. The state is proud of you. Your family awaits. But as you get closer to the familiar valley of the Eurotas, you become aware of something you have long since grown numb to. Your own smell. For weeks, perhaps months, you have lived in a state of profound filth. You have not had a proper wash since you left. Your single tunic is stiff with dried sweat, dirt, and probably blood. Your red cloak, which has served as your blanket, your raincoat, and your bandage, carries the rich, complex aroma of the entire campaign. Your long, oily hair is matted with grime. Your body is covered in a layer of dust and a constellation of healing scabs, flea bites, and scratches. You are, to put it mildly, absolutely foul. And you are not alone. The entire army reeks. The column of returning heroes is enveloped in a powerful, collective stench. The miasma of unwashed bodies, stale wine, old blood, and exhaustion. This overwhelming smell of the returning warrior is an unavoidable historical reality, the sensory footprint of ancient warfare. While poets would sing of your glorious deeds, no one would write an ode to your aroma. As you march through the outer villages, the people come out to greet you. They cheer, they wave, but they also keep a respectful distance, and you understand why. You are a walking biohazard. The welcome is heartfelt, but no one wants to get too close. The women and children look at you with a mixture of awe, perhaps a little bit of revulsion. You are the defender of their society, but you smell like the wilderness, like something that has been living in a ditch. Now for a specific and slightly poignant detail about your homecoming. You return first not to your own house, but to the barracks in the SYS Sidian. Your primary identity is still that of a soldier. Your reunion is first with your messmates, the men who survived alongside you. There, you might share a bowl of the familiar black soup and a cup of wine, recounting the stories of the battle. It is a slow, deliberate decompression. The state gets you back before your family does. Only after this initial period of reintegration with your unit are you released to go home. You walk through the streets of Sparta, no longer as a part of a marching column, but as an individual. You arrive at the door of the house where your wife and children live, the house that has never truly felt like your home. Your wife greets you with the same stoic reserve she was raised with. There are no tearful embraces, no passionate kisses at the doorway. Such displays are un-Spartan. Her approval is a quiet nod, a look in her eyes that acknowledges you have done your duty and survived. Your children, whom you barely know, look at you with a mixture of fear and curiosity. You are this strange, loud, smelly man who occasionally appears and then vanishes again. This awkwardness of the return of the soldier has been a subject of historical and psychological debate for centuries. How did Spartan warriors, conditioned for a life of brutal austerity and all-male companionship, reintegrate into family life? The ancient sources, focused on politics and war, are almost entirely silent on this. They do not tell us about the returning soldier's nightmares, or the difficulty of switching from a commander of men to a husband and father. Some historians argue that the Spartans, by design, never truly reintegrated. The system was set up to ensure their primary psychological bond was always with their comrades, not their families. The furtive nature of marriage, the communal living, the constant training, it all served to keep them emotionally detached from the domestic sphere. Other scholars suggest we might be underestimating their capacity for adaptation. They argue that the stoic exterior might have hidden deeper familial bonds. The shared danger and the joy of survival could have created powerful, if understated, emotional reunions. Perhaps the stoicism was a public performance, and in the privacy of their own homes, a different dynamic emerged. The debate touches on the very nature of Spartan manhood. Were they emotionally stunted killing machines? Or were they complex individuals capable of navigating the starkly different worlds of the barracks and the home? You stand in your own home, feeling like a stranger. The air inside is clean. It smells of wood smoke and baked bread, a stark contrast to your own overwhelming stage. Your wife hands you a clean tunic and points you towards a basin of water. It is not the icy Eurotas, but it is not a luxurious hot bath either. It is just a simple, functional wash. As you scrub away weeks of filth, you are not just cleaning your body. You are trying to scrub away the sights, the sounds, and the smells of the campaign. You are trying to shed the skin of the warrior and find the man underneath. But you know that the grime is more than skin deep. The hero has come home, that the war has come home with him. The day finally arrives when you are 30 years old. This is a major milestone in the life of a Spartan man. After 23 years of living under the direct control of the state, 7 in the domestic sphere and 23 in the all-encompassing world of the Agoge and the barracks, you are finally granted a new privilege. You are allowed to move out of the barracks and live at home with your wife and family. It sounds like a liberation, a return to normalcy. But after more than 2 decades of communal living, normal is a foreign concept. You pack up your meager belongings, your spare tunic, your comb, your cloak, and walk from the only home you have ever truly known to a house that is legally yours but feels like someone else's. Your wife has managed the household, the small plot of land kale arrows, and the helots who work it. She is a capable, independent woman, as Spartan society requires her to be. Your children have grown up seeing you as a visitor. Now, you are a permanent fixture, and your presence disrupts the established rhythms of the household. This transition from full-time soldier to a man who lives at home is a key, and often overlooked, stage of Spartan life. While you no longer sleep in the barracks, your obligations to the state are far from over. You are still a soldier on active duty. You are still required to take your main meal every single day at the SYS sit-in with your messmates. Your social and political life still revolves around the men, not your family. You are essentially a commuter, leaving your house each day to go to work, which consists of training, political discussions, and communal dining. The hygiene habits you have spent a lifetime acquiring are now imported into a domestic setting. You still favor the quick, cold wash over a comfortable bath. You are still largely indifferent to personal clutter or cleanliness within the home, a stark contrast to the obsessive care you give your weapons. You might track mud through the house on your calloused, bare feet without a second thought. You have the habits of a man who has lived in a barn for 2 decades. And here we find a fascinating and slightly comical detail of domestic friction. Imagine the perspective of your wife. She has been running an orderly household. No, this large, loud man who is used to a world without women, without domestic rules, and without any concept of indoor voices, moves in. The potential for conflict over basic living habits is immense. You might leave your oily, grimy clothes lying around. You might be unused to the simple courtesies of family life. You talk in the clip, direct, and often harsh manner of the barracks. The skills that made you a good soldier. Indifference to comfort, suppression of emotion, a focus on utility over aesthetics, make you a challenging housemate. This situation leads to a rich debate among social historians about the nature of the Spartan family. Was the Spartan household a place of affection and partnership? Or was it simply a functional unit for procreation and managing an estate? The traditional view emphasizes the separation and the emotional distance. The man's world was the Spartan. The woman's world was the oikos household, and the two rarely intersected in a meaningful, the emotional way. This view suggests that Spartan marriages were largely loveless, practical arrangements. However, a more nuanced perspective argues that we should not project modern ideas of romance onto the past. In the ancient world, most marriages were practical arrangements. The Spartan system, while extreme, might have fostered a different kind of bond, one based on mutual respect, shared duty to the state, and a partnership in raising the next generation of citizens. The fact that Spartan women could inherit and manage property gave them a degree of autonomy and power, unknown in other Greek cities. Perhaps the relationship between husband and wife was less like a romance and more like a business partnership, with each respecting the other's domain and contributions. The debate centers on whether the Spartan family was a failed, emotionally barren institution or a successful, alternative model adapted to the unique pressures of its society. You sit by the hearth in your own home. The fire is warm. Your youngest child watches you with wide, uncertain eyes. Your wife moves about the room with a quiet efficiency that you find both admirable and intimidating. It is quiet here. Too quiet. You miss the boisterous, crude energy of the mess hall. You miss the easy camaraderie of men who have shared everything from their food to their fear. You feel a strange sense of dislocation, of being a guest in your own life. You are physically present in your home, but your mind is still in the barracks. You have left the Agoge, but in many ways, the Agoge has never left you. The transition to domestic life is not an end to your training. It is just a new, and perhaps more difficult, phase of it. The years continue to pass. You are no longer the young warrior, or the man in his prime. You are now an old soldier, a veteran. You have reached your 60s. Your hair, which you once combed with such pride, is now thin and gray. The state has finally released you from your military obligations. You no longer have to fight. You no longer have to train every day. You are, for the first time in your life, truly free. But your body is a roadmap of the hard life you have lived. The Spartan system was designed to create the greatest soldiers of the world, not healthy old men. The physical toll of a lifetime of brutal training, poor nutrition, and untreated injuries is now making itself known. Your joints ache with a deep, persistent pain, a legacy of countless hours of running barefoot on hard ground and sleeping on cold reeds, old wounds, long since healed over, throb with a phantom pain when the weather turns cold. Your back is a landscape of scars. You are a living monument to Spartan endurance, a respected elder in the community. You might even be elected to the Geographic, the Council of Elders, the same body of old men that inspected you on the day you were born. It is the highest honor a Spartan citizen can achieve. You now spend your days offering counsel, judging disputes, and ensuring the traditions of the state are upheld. But there is one specific, nagging, and thoroughly unglamorous problem that plagues you and almost every other man your age. Your teeth. Your dental health is, in a word, catastrophic. This is a stark historical reality for most people in the pre-modern world. But it would have been particularly bad for a Spartan. Your diet, for your entire life, has been incredibly abrasive. The barley bread was coarse and often contaminated with grit from the grinding stones. This acted like sandpaper on your enamel, wearing your teeth down to stumps. The black soup, with its high vinegar content, was incredibly acidic, further eroding your teeth. You have never used a toothbrush. You have never had any form of dental care. So, by the time you are an old man, your mouth is a wreck. You likely have numerous cavities, abscesses, and chronic gum disease. The constant, low-grade pain of a tooth arch is just a normal part of your existence. Many of your teeth have probably already fallen out. Eating the tough barley bread is now a painful ordeal. You have to soak it in wine or soup to soften it enough to gum it down. The legendary Spartan warrior, who once faced down Persian armies without flinching, is now defeated by a crust of bread. It is a slow and dignified decline. This terrible state of dental health provides a fascinating and grim little detail for bioarchaeologists who study ancient remains. The teeth of ancient skeletons are like a diary. By examining the wear patterns, the cavities, and the abscesses on a skull, they can deduce a huge amount about an individual's diet, health, and lifestyle. The teeth of skeletons found in and around the Laconian region often show exactly this kind of extreme wear and decay, a silent testament to the harshness of the Spartan diet. This brings us to a poignant debate among historians of aging. How did Spartan society view its elderly warriors? On the one hand, they were revered. The juris held immense political power. The elders were seen as the living repositories of Spartan law and custom. Their wisdom was sought, and their authority was absolute. This reverence for age was a cornerstone of their social structure, a stark contrast to the youth-obsessed cultures of some other Greek states. However, there is a darker side to this. The Spartan system was obsessed with physical utility. What happens when a warrior is no longer physically useful? While you were granted respect, was there also an underlying current of pity or even contempt for your physical decay? In a society that equated weakness with shame, how did you reconcile your honored status as an elder with your failing body? Did the young warriors, in their prime, look at you and your toothless comrades with a secret fear of their own inevitable decline? The debate centers on whether the respect for the elderly was genuine and holistic, or if it was a conditional respect, granted to the mind while quietly scorning the frailty of the body that housed it. Was old age a triumphant final chapter, or a prolonged, embarrassing epilogue to a life of action? You sit in the sun, your old red cloak wrapped around your stooped shoulders for warmth. A group of boys from the Agoge runs past, their bare feet pounding the earth, their shouts echoing in the clear air. They are a vision of your own distant past. They are young, strong, and oblivious to the price their bodies will one day pay. You watch them with a complex mixture of pride, nostalgia, and a strange sort of pity. Your jaw aches. You have survived countless battles, endless hardship, and the relentless grind of the Spartan system. You have earned your place as an honored elder. But in the quiet moments, you are just a tired old man with a toothache, waiting for the end. Your life, which began with a cold, clinical inspection, ends in quiet simplicity. There is no long, lingering illness in a soft bed. Your body, worn out from a lifetime of service, simply gives out. Your last breath is drawn not in a hospital, but in your own home, surrounded by the stoic, familiar faces of your family. The great machine of your life has finally ground to a halt. What happens next is the final expression of the Spartan ethos. There are no elaborate, ostentatious funeral rites. Your death, like your life, is subject to the needs and the laws of the state. Your family washes your body one last time. They wrap you not in a fancy burial shroud, but in the same faded, worn-out red cloak that you wore for most of your life. It is your uniform in death as it was in life. A few olive leaves are placed with you. That is all. Your burial is swift and unceremonious. You are not interred in a grand mausoleum or a richly decorated tomb. The lore, supposedly laid down by the great legislator Lycurgus, forbade it. You are placed in a simple, shallow grave dug in the earth, close to the city. There is no public procession, no hired mourners wailing and tearing their clothes. Such displays of excessive grief were considered weak, foreign, and disruptive to the good order of the state. A brief, 11-day period of mourning is observed by your immediate family, and then life is expected to return to normal. Sparta could not afford to be paralyzed by grief. This stark, minimalist approach to death is a core historical fact of Spartan society. It was a radical departure from the practices of other Greeks, and indeed, most ancient cultures, which often involved elaborate public funerals, expensive grave goods, and long periods of mourning. The Spartans believed that virtue and memory were the only true memorials. A man's legacy was his service to the state and the children he left behind. Not a fancy tombstone, but here lies that final, unique detail we have touched on before. The one exception to the rule of anonymity. If you were an ordinary citizen who died of old age or sickness, your grave would be unmarked. But because you are a man who died after a lifetime of military service, having survived your battles, your final resting place will also be unmarked. The special honor of a named gravestone, as Plutarch tells us, was reserved only for those men who died in the heat of battle. It is a stunning final statement from the state. Your greatest potential contribution was a glorious death in combat. By surviving to old age, you have earned respect and a peaceful end, but you have forfeited that ultimate, final honor. This stark distinction has led to a profound and final debate among historians and philosophers. What does this funerary practice tell us about the Spartan view of a good life? Did they truly believe that a life cut short in battle was superior to a long life of service, family, and counsel as an elder? The traditional interpretation says yes. The highest value of the state was placed on sacrifice. The soldier who fell in the phalanx was the ultimate embodiment of Spartan virtue. His name was carved in stone to serve as an eternal inspiration to the boys in the Agoge. However, our revisionist argument might question this. Perhaps the lack of a marker for a man like you was not a slight, but a different kind of honor. Your memorial was not a stone, but the continuing existence of Sparta itself, which you helped to preserve through your long life of duty. Your legacy was woven into the fabric of the state you served. The named grave for the fallen soldier was a consolation prize for a life cut short, while your unmarked grave was a symbol of a life fully and completely lived according to Spartan ideals. The debate is about whether Spartan society valued the act of dying for the state more than the act of living for it. Was the ultimate goal to be a martyr or a veteran? Your body is lowered into the cool, dark earth. A simple wooden plank might be laid over you before the dirt is shoveled back in. There are no tears, only the grim, silent acceptance that is the Spartan way. Your sons, now men, watch without expression. They will soon return to their training, to their mess halls, to the life you have just left. Your story, from the cold inspection at the last shade to this quiet patch of earth, is complete. You were to love the state, forged in hardship, used in war, and now, your utility at an end. You are put away with simple, unadorned finality. Your name will be forgotten, but the wall you helped to build and defend still stands. For a Spartan, there is no greater epitaph. And so, the story ends. The tough, smelly, and unbelievably resilient life of the Spartan soldier fades back into the mists of history. The dust settles over that simple, unmarked grave in the Laconian soil. The sharp edges of that world, the icy river, the taste of blood soup, the sting of the wet, begin to soften as you drift further away from it, back into the quiet comfort of your own bed. The sounds of the Agoge fade, replaced by the gentle hum of the fan in your room. The hard ground of the barracks melts away into the softness of your mattress. You can let go of that tension now. There are no more inspections to pass, no more battles to fight. There is only the stillness of the night and the gentle pull of sleep. Feel the weight of your own body, safe and warm under the blankets, a world away from that single, scratchy red cloak. You are no longer in Sparta. You are here, now, in this peaceful moment. Let the last vestiges of that hard, ancient world dissolve, leaving behind only the quiet rhythm of your own breathing, a soft and steady beat in the deep silence of the night.